Hi! In this video, we will continue to learn about how the brain learns. As a reminder, in our last video, you learned about the sensory brain and how we take in and process information. Information enters the brain in the sensory cortex, and that information is put together to create an abstract idea of what we're sensing. We use the frontal cortex to connect that abstract idea to the things that we already know, and then we act on that information through our behavior. The key point was that the entire brain is used to process information. In this video, we will focus on the cells of the brain and how they respond to the process of learning. When we look closely at the brain itself, we can see that it contains roughly 200 billion highly specialized cells, which are called neurons, and which have the ability to pass information to other cells. Neurons have a cell body, which is called a soma. You can see the soma on the left of the diagram of a neuron. Neurons also have specialized extensions. Dendrites extend directly from the soma and receive chemical signals from other cells. Those signals are processed at the soma before the signals sent along the axon to the termini, which are on the right-hand side of the diagram. The termini connect with dendrites on additional neurons, or to excitable cells, which are cells that will respond to the signals such as muscle cells. Those neurons connect into a complex network of billions of cells and send messages from one cell to the next in a process called neurotransmission. The path that each of these messages takes across the vast network of connected cells in our brain is what makes our bodies function and thoughts form. Think about how the dendrites and termini of every neuron extend in 3 dimensions, connecting to many different neurons at the same time. The chemical message that one neuron receives and sends on to the next could come from any of those neurons connected to it in the network. The more connections that neuron makes with other neurons, the more thoughts it can be involved in making. In the past few minutes, you've seen that neurons have many dendrites and termini extending from the cell body and the axon, and I've told you that these extensions send and receive information to and from other neurons. When a signal is received from other cells, the cell body is stimulated to send an electrical pulse along the axon. When this happens, we say that the nerve fires an impulse. The axon branches out at the termini, and each terminus can stimulate a different neuron. Researchers have made wonderful progress mapping these connections across the brain. In addition, researchers are also investigating how these connections grow and change in response to different activities. The brain physically changes as a result of stimulation along new or existing paths between neurons. Learning is one activity that stimulates growth and change in the connections between neurons. Neurons can divide and replicate. New dendrites reach out to receive information from other neurons, and new termini branch off to send the impulse along a new path. When we are involved in actively learning over a period of time, regions of the brain that are stimulated during that learning increase in size and mass. This growth is very important for learning. This ability of the brain to physically change is called neuroplasticity. If we were to look at an aging brain from an individual who is no longer actively learning, we might see neurons with few dendrites and termini. On the other hand, neurons from brains that are engaged in active learning have far more dendrites compared to what neurons in the less used brains have. As we discussed earlier in the video, if you have more dendrites and termini, you have more physical connections between your neurons, and you're capable of making more connections within the information that you know. When you learn new information, when you think about things and make connections among the things you're thinking about, your brain is actually signaling itself to increase the physical connections that exist between those neurons. What does this tell us? We have to use our physical brain to increase our capacity for learning. The more you work your brain, the more it can do. This process is similar to how your muscles grow stronger when you work them out. Of course, there is an important corollary to this concept, and that is that your intelligence is not a fixed characteristic. You can change how smart you are by working your brain to increase the number of physical connections it makes. You can no longer say, "I'm not smart enough to understand this," because now you know that you can increase your brain capacity by thinking about meaningful connections between old and new information. You just have to make the connections and allow enough time for your brain to grow and physically change. You can become smarter simply by using your brain. Now, there are a few things that influence our changing brains that are helpful for you to know. The first influence is physical activity. Many researchers have investigated the effect of physical activity on our ability to think and learn. Results from these studies tell us that regular physical activity, like exercise or active recreation, at any stage in life increases and improves mental functioning. How is this happening? Evidence suggests that physical activity stimulates the growth of your brain, so that you have greater areas of brain involved in memory formation, and you are able to keep those memories for longer periods of time. But furthermore, regular physical exercise can reduce the damaging effects of stress and increase the beneficial impact of sleep. Cardiorespiratory fitness is associated with better attention, faster mental processing speeds, and more working memory capacity. In general, being physically fit increases your cognitive fitness. Speaking of sleep, it is important to discuss the impact that sleep has on learning. Now, over the years, researchers have had many competing theories about why we sleep, but amazing new evidence for why we need sleep has only recently started to emerge. Innovative research shows that the cells in the brains physically shrink during deep sleep, and this allows cerebral spinal fluid to flow more freely around them throughout the brain. The greater flow flushes away the toxic protein byproducts of cell metabolism that, if left behind, build up and inhibit nervous impulses signaling in the brain. Imagine a corroded battery. If the electricity can't get through the corrosion, the battery won't work to power your device. So sleep is critical for removing toxic buildup that prevents our neurons from making these connections as messages are communicated from cell to cell. Furthermore, cell and tissue growth happens primarily when we sleep. The growth of dendrites that we discussed earlier in this video happens during sleep, so if you don't get enough sleep, you reduce your ability to make the mental connections you made among ideas into physical connections in your brain. The process of setting these initially temporary connections you made as you first learned something is called consolidation, and you have to spend enough time in deep sleep to fully consolidate your memories. A good analogy here is the effect traffic has on roadways. When roads are used heavily, they're increased from 2 lanes to 4 lanes to 8-lane highways. However, we don't even bother paving roads we don't use much. In the context of brains, neural pathways that are highly used grow and are reinforced while you sleep, while those that are not used degenerate and are cleared away. Imagine you go to a lecture and take some notes, but then you don't look at those notes for weeks until you've got an exam. You've probably forgotten most of the things you learned in lecture because you didn't use that information. Likewise, someone who stays up all night studying has denied their brain the opportunity to consolidate all that newly learned information into long-term memory, so it will be easily lost or forgotten, probably right before the big final exam. The take-home message is that after actively thinking about what you are learning, the best things you can do to enhance learning and thinking are get a good night's sleep, then review the material again. Let's recap what we have learned so far. We use our whole brain to process sensory information and turn it into thoughts. Thinking happens when electrical signals are passed from cell to cell along pathways throughout the brain, and in order to learn, we have to actively think about connections between new information and what we already know. When we are making these mental connections, we are also making physical connections between neurons in the brain. Our brain physically grows and changes as we learn. Other factors, like our level of cardiorespiratory fitness and the amount of quality of sleep we get, have a major impact on our brain's ability to think and learn. Students should consider each of these factors so that they can make good choices that are likely to lead to successful learning. Thanks for your attention. We'll see you in our next video.